You're standing in the middle of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, a city so dazzling that Spanish conquistadors later said it looked like a dream. The air smells like roasted maize, burning copal incense, and something metallic that makes your stomach twist. Because here, beneath the bright temples and the shimmering canals, there's another kind of beauty, the kind that comes from order, maintained through terror. In the Aztec world, life was sacred, but so was law. And when those two collided, the results could make your skin crawl, especially if you were a woman. The Aztecs didn't just rule through armies and gods. They ruled through rules, an entire universe of codes that decided everything from how you cooked your tortillas to how you behaved in bed. And breaking those codes? That wasn't just a crime, it was a direct insult to the gods. Now, among all the things that could get you punished, theft, gossip, adultery, even laziness, one crime stood above all for women. It was the kind of crime that could erase your name, your honor, and your life in a single afternoon. The Aztecs called it tlacatlaqualiztli. The word roughly meant eating of people, not cannibalism, but the act of destroying the moral fabric of another human being. In simpler terms, it meant adultery. And for an Aztec woman, it was the most dangerous mistake she could ever make. To understand why, you have to remember that the Aztecs weren't just obsessed with the gods, they believed the universe itself ran on sacred balance. Men and women had cosmic roles. Men went to war to shed blood for the Sunday, women gave blood in childbirth, the mirror of war. Both were heroes in their own right, but both had to stay pure in their duty. When a woman broke that balance, the punishment wasn't just about law, it was about cosmic restoration. The gods demanded correction, and the state delivered it. Picture this. You're a married woman in Tenochtitlan. Maybe your husband's a soldier stationed in faraway Tlaxcala. You've been alone for months, the neighbors whispering, the air thick with rumor. One careless night, someone sees you slip out of your house at dusk, your shawl drawn low. That single moment, one shadow seen by the wrong eyes, could end everything. Because in the Aztec Empire, adultery wasn't a private scandal. It was a public crisis. There was no quiet divorce, no whispered forgiveness. Once accused, you didn't get a lawyer. You got a trial held in your local ticali, the household court, where elders and priests sat in judgment. And if they found you guilty, the sentence wasn't imprisonment. The Aztecs didn't waste resources keeping criminals alive. Your punishment would come swiftly, and it would come with spectacle. For noble women, the sentence was strangulation, slow, deliberate, and performed before the community. For commoners, it was even worse. Adulterous women were dragged to the marketplace, stripped to the waist, and stoned to death. Their bodies were left there, a warning carved in flesh and silence. The logic was brutal but precise. The marketplace was the heart of the city, the place of trade, speech, and gossip. To die there meant your shame was traded as currency. The Aztecs believed punishment wasn't just retribution, it was education. Every spectator learned that moral decay had a price, and it was paid in blood. But here's the part that makes it even more disturbing. The man you were accused with faced the same fate. Adultery wasn't a gendered crime. Both participants died, often side by side. If the man ran, his entire neighborhood could be fined until he was found. If he hid in a temple, even the gods couldn't save him. Priests were ordered to drag him out. And still, the punishment for women carried an extra layer. Because beyond the public death, there was social annihilation. Your name was erased from household records. Your children lost inheritance rights. The stain followed your entire lineage. It was as if the act itself had cursed your bloodline. You might wonder why a civilization that built floating gardens, studied astronomy, and performed complex surgeries was so merciless about something like infidelity. The answer lies in how the Aztecs viewed the world as a constant struggle to keep chaos at bay. To them, sexual discipline wasn't prudishness, it was cosmic engineering. When the Spanish missionaries arrived a century later, and wrote down Aztec customs. Even they were shocked by the precision of these laws. They described courts where women begged for mercy, husbands forced to confirm guilt, and witnesses brought in to recount what they'd seen. But there was one detail the friars didn't exaggerate: the fear these trials inspired. The Aztec legal code, the tlacatlaqualiztli, didn't just threaten punishment, it preached it. Mothers warned their daughters that a woman's honor was her shield, her house, her sky. Losing it meant falling out of the universe. Some sayings compared an unfaithful woman to a pot shattered beyond repair. Nothing useful could be made from it again. But the cruelty wasn't only in the act of punishment, it was in its spectacle. The crowd's silence, the dust, the slow rhythm of stones hitting flesh. Punishment was theater. The Aztecs believed justice had to be seen to work, and by making it public, they turned each death into a ritual that reinforced the power of the empire. Yet not every story ended the same way. Some women tried to outwit the system. The Aztec courts required evidence, physical, visual, or testimonial. A woman caught in another man's house might claim she'd been forced. If the elders believed her, the punishment shifted. The man could be executed while she was spared, though her social life was over. Others fled to temples seeking asylum, hoping the priests would delay their trial long enough for witnesses to disappear. Sometimes, husbands themselves hesitated to accuse, because in the Aztec world, failing to control your household was also shameful. A man whose wife was executed for adultery was often ridiculed as weak, unable to govern his own family. So, the punishment didn't just destroy the woman, it fractured everything around her. It's easy to imagine these punishments as pure cruelty. But to the Aztecs, this was order. It was the same logic that demanded human hearts for the sun to rise, a belief that sacrifice, however terrible, kept the universe alive. In that sense, an adulterous woman's death wasn't seen as vengeance. It was balance restored, a fragment of chaos removed from the world before it spread. And yet, the silence after such punishments must have been deafening. The same city that burst with song and flowers during festivals also watched its own people die in the streets. The same people who praised mothers as warriors of life also crushed women under stones for love. It's this contradiction, beauty and brutality entwined, that made the Aztec world both magnificent and terrifying. You'd think that after witnessing an execution like that, every woman in Tenochtitlan would have walked on eggshells for the rest of her life. And honestly, most did. But in an empire built on ritual and hierarchy, purity didn't stop at fidelity. The Aztecs expected women to embody order itself, to keep houses clean, children obedient, and bodies disciplined. A single misstep could make you a lesson for everyone else. If adultery was the ultimate offense, then neglect was the silent one. A mother who failed to raise her children properly, a wife who disobeyed her husband, or even a young girl who wandered at night could all face punishment. Sometimes it wasn't death. Sometimes it was something almost worse, humiliation so deep it lived longer than the body ever could. Picture the marketplace again, the same place where trade buzzed and gossip swirled. A young woman accused of idleness stands before a crowd. Maybe she skipped weaving duties, maybe she mouthed off to her elders. The punishment? Her hair was cut off, every braid, every glossy strand shaved to the scalp. For an Aztec woman, hair was identity, pride, and status. Losing it meant losing your social face. She'd be paraded through the square, her head shining in the sun, every step a public reminder that beauty came second to obedience. And if she repeated the offense, the whips came out. Wooden paddles called quahololi, studded with obsidian shards, cracked across her back until the blood mixed with dust. It wasn't random cruelty. It was ritualized correction, the same precision they applied to war. Even girls weren't spared. Children grew up surrounded by warnings carved into everyday speech. A popular saying went, "A woman must walk as though carrying water in her hands." It meant quiet, careful, never spilling, never defying. In school, young girls trained to spin thread and weave cloth for the temples. Laziness could earn them beatings from their instructors, sometimes using maguey thorns that left tiny holes along the arms, a permanent dotted reminder of failure. Marriage itself was treated like a religious contract. Women weren't property, but they were expected to serve a cosmic function, order within the home. Refusing domestic duty was rebellion against the gods who built the world through discipline. The goddess Tlacatlaqualiztli, patron of both lust and purification, watched over female morality. People called her the eater of filth. Not an insult, but a warning. She devoured sins, but she also exposed them. If you confessed to Tlacatlaqualiztli before being caught, you might be forgiven. The priests would cleanse you with ritual baths, prayers, and incense. But confess too late, after human judges learned of your crime, and even the goddess turned away. The Aztecs didn't separate the spiritual from the civic. Sin was law, law was theology. It's strange to think how public these boundaries were. Modern life hides punishment behind walls and paperwork. In Tenochtitlan, it unfolded right in front of you, a spectacle of justice and shame woven into the rhythm of city life. A thief lost his property and sometimes a finger, a drunk noble lost his life. And for women, control of behavior stretched even into clothing. The Aztec sumptuary laws dictated who could wear what. Common women were forbidden to wear brightly dyed cotton or gold ornaments. Violating that rule was seen as arrogance, trying to climb above your station, pretending to be divine. The penalty ranged from confiscation of the garment to flogging. Imagine spending months weaving a beautiful huipil, only to have it ripped apart in front of your neighbors because someone thought the embroidery looked too rich. Even sound carried danger. Loud laughter in public was suspect. It suggested looseness. Singing alone in the street could bring accusations of impropriety. Aztec moralists wrote speeches warning women not to speak too often or show teeth when smiling. Not because of modesty as we understand it, but because public composure mirrored cosmic balance. A chaotic tongue meant a chaotic soul. Still, beneath all that control was complexity. Some women wielded enormous influence. Midwives, priestesses, merchants, and matchmakers held social power few men could touch. A skilled midwife could command gifts and respect, invoking goddess Cihuacoatl during births as if channeling divine war energy. But even she had limits. If a baby died during birth due to her negligence, punishment awaited, not imprisonment, but ritual degradation. She'd be forced to fast, bathe in freezing water, and offer her blood in penance. Her hands, the instruments of life, had to atone through pain, and childbirth itself could become punishment. The Aztecs saw giving birth as battle, with the mother as warrior. If she died during labor, her soul became a Cihuateteo, a divine spirit honored in death. But if she survived and neglected her maternal duties, her prestige curdled into shame. Legends said negligent mothers risked haunting their own children after death, restless for forgiveness. In a world where even the sun demanded sacrifice to rise each morning, personal error carried cosmic consequences. When a woman misbehaved, it wasn't just her reputation on trial. It was balance itself, tipping toward chaos. The empire's stability, its crops, its armies all hung on the moral precision of its people. And at the top of this moral pyramid stood the law. The Aztecs didn't improvise justice, they codified it. Their legal system was advanced: judges, evidence, appeal courts. But mercy? That was rare. Law wasn't designed to rehabilitate, it was meant to warn. There's a case recorded by Spanish chroniclers after the Conquest. A woman accused of gossiping about a noble's wife. Just gossip, spreading words. Yet those words were seen as blades that cut through social order. The punishment wasn't death, but her house was torn down. Literally dismantled, brick by brick, until only dust remained. She was forced to rebuild it alone. Imagine watching your home vanish into rubble because your tongue wandered too far. Through it all, one thing becomes clear. Aztec justice didn't rely on prisons because shame did the work. You didn't need bars when your entire community was the cage. Every punishment was performance correction through spectacle. The crowd didn't just watch. They participated by remembering, retelling, reinforcing. What makes these laws chilling isn't the violence itself, but the precision of belief behind them. These weren't acts of rage, they were rituals. Every stroke, every stone, every shaved head was calibrated to restore divine equilibrium. And for women, that equilibrium was both cage and armor. Obedience kept you safe, but safety meant silence. As night fell over Tenochtitlan, the same hands that punished also built beauty. Women prepared offerings, polished obsidian mirrors, and wove blankets for the gods. The air filled with songs praising fertility, virtue, and endurance. Yet somewhere behind a courtyard wall, a whisper reminded every daughter of what could happen if she strayed too far from the line. The city glowed under torchlight, magnificent and terrifying order maintained by faith, faith enforced by fear of disgrace worse than death. And the punishments that followed weren't merely about behavior. They were about reminding every woman, every family, every beating heart that the empire's perfection depended on their discipline. Tomorrow, at sunrise, the markets would open again. Drums would beat, children would laugh, and somewhere in the shadows, the echoes of today's punishment would settle into legend, a story retold to daughters, half warning, half prayer. By dawn, Tenochtitlan shimmered again, canals glistening, pyramids painted in red and white, smoke from morning fires curling above the rooftops. Life resumed, as if the city hadn't watched punishment the day before. That was part of the Aztec rhythm. The world demanded balance, and balance required forgetting almost as much as remembering. But some punishments were harder to forget, because they blurred the line between devotion and torment. Nowhere was that more visible than in the world of childbirth. For the Aztecs, birth wasn't a domestic moment, it was a battlefield disguised as a bedroom. When a woman went into labor, she became a warrior, literally. The midwife, part doctor, part priestess, greeted her with a cry that warriors shouted before battle. As contractions came, the attendants chanted, urging her to fight bravely for the child, as if storming an enemy fortress. And if she died, she was celebrated like a soldier fallen in combat. Her body was wrapped in fine cloth, her hair adorned with feathers, her soul destined to accompany the setting Sunday. But victory had its own demands, survive, and the struggle continued. The midwife cut the cord with an obsidian blade, held the baby toward the 4 cardinal directions, and announced its destiny: warrior for boys, weaver for girls. Then she bathed both mother and child in ritual water, cleansing them of the blood that bound life and death together. If the ceremony was done wrong, or the water tainted, people whispered that the gods might reject the newborn. A careless midwife could be accused of spiritual negligence. Sometimes she was forced to undergo purification herself, fasting, bloodletting, and days of silence. The Aztecs didn't separate mistakes from sin. Every act carried cosmic consequence. Women's bodies weren't private. They were portals through which divine order entered the world. And when those bodies failed through miscarriage, stillbirth, or deformity, the questions began. Was it a curse, a punishment, neglect of ritual? A mother could be questioned, not medically but morally. The line between tragedy and guilt blurred until the sorrow itself became confession. Religious law reached into these moments. The goddess Cihuacoatl, part mother and part specter, symbolized both fertility and vengeance. Women prayed to her for safe births, but feared her shadow. They said she walked at night near crossroads, weeping for the children who died too soon. To cross her path was an omen, a reminder that motherhood could elevate or destroy. And not all punishments came from human judges. The Aztecs believed illness itself could be divine retribution. A woman who lied, disrespected her husband, or violated purity rules might find her body betraying her sores, fevers, infertility. Priests treated disease with both herbs and confession, asking what sin had called the sickness into being. It sounds cruel, but it created a strange kind of accountability. Every act mattered, every secret left a trace. To live without discipline wasn't just risky, it was cosmically dangerous. Even cleanliness was sacred. Women who worked in the temples kept strict hygiene rituals, bathing daily, burning incense, fasting before ceremonies. If one entered a temple in an unclean state, the penalty was public penance. She'd kneel before the altar, pierce her earlobes with maguey thorns, and let the blood fall into the dust as apology. Some cut their tongues instead, believing words had caused the offense, so words or the mouth that formed them had to bleed in return. The act wasn't sadistic, it was symbolic. Blood was the currency of life, and spilling a little voluntarily was better than having it taken by force. To offer pain was to reset the balance before punishment demanded more. That same logic extended to ritual sacrifice, the ultimate form of payment to the gods. While most victims were men, there were women too, chosen for roles so sacred that the line between punishment and honor disappeared. During the festival of tlacatlaqualiztli, marking the cleansing of the earth, a young woman was selected to embody the goddess Tochi. For weeks, she lived in luxury, fed, bathed, adorned like a queen. But everyone knew how it would end. On the final day, she was paraded through the city, greeted by cheers and flowers, before being sacrificed in the temple courtyard. Her death was purification, the city shedding its sins through her body. To outsiders, it looks like cruelty. To the Aztecs, it was transcendence. The chosen woman didn't die in disgrace, she became divine. But for every celebrated ritual death, hundreds of unseen women bore smaller, quieter punishments. Those who spoke carelessly during ceremonies, who dropped offerings, who stumbled during processions, they'd be flogged or fined, sometimes forced to sweep temple courtyards for weeks. The irony is almost unbearable. The same culture that honored feminine power through goddesses also confined real women inside invisible walls of obedience. You could be revered as life-bringer, but never step beyond the script written for you. The higher the honor, the narrower the path. Aztec men feared losing wars. Aztec women feared failing virtue. And virtue wasn't emotion, it was performance, measured in gesture and silence. Yet within those limits, women carved space for resistance. Some became poets, their verses surviving conquest and conversion. They wrote of longing, of courage, of identity. A noblewoman named Tenochtitlan composed songs praising the beauty of truth over flattery, comparing dishonest tongues to worms devouring hearts. Her words spread across the empire, gentle rebellion disguised as wisdom. Others found power in trade. Marketumen, the Tiangeras, were economic engines of the empire. They managed stalls, negotiated with merchants, and even enforced their own rules. If a woman cheated customers or sold spoiled food, her punishment came not from priests but from her peers. The market guilds maintained order through their own brand of justice: fines, public shame, sometimes beating. Still, behind every marketplace joke and temple song hung the same understanding. Authority came with watchful eyes. The empire ran on vigilance. By the time the Spaniards arrived, the Aztec legal system was among the most advanced in the world. Courts, appeals, even precedents, but no amount of paperwork softened the ritual core of justice. Laws existed not only to regulate society, but to feed its gods. And when women suffered under them, it wasn't just for discipline, it was for balance. If a noble woman misused her servants, she could be executed, her body left near her house as warning to her peers. If a midwife practiced sorcery outside temple sanction, she might be drowned in the lake, offered to the spirits she'd tried to command. The punishments were physical metaphors, purification through elements: fire, earth, water, air. Some chroniclers after the conquest described these acts with horror, calling them barbaric. But to the Aztecs, they were poetry. Cruel poetry, yes, but bound by meaning. Every punishment fit its sin in texture and symbolism. Fire for impurity, water for deception, stone for betrayal. The universe kept its rhythm through suffering precisely tuned to offense. And maybe that's what made the empire so enduring, its terrifying consistency. You could predict your fate. You could trace the line from action to punishment as clearly as a path drawn in obsidian dust. There was no mystery, no chaos, only the cold reassurance that balance would always find you, no matter who you were. As the sun climbed over the temples and the day began, life went on beneath that calm certainty. Drums thudded, maize boiled, prayers rose into the sky, and somewhere in the city's heart, another judgment waited, another woman whispering her confession to a goddess who devoured sin but never forgot. When the Spaniards finally marched into Tenochtitlan, everything changed, but not at first. The city still breathed incense and blood. Drums still echoed across the canals. For a brief moment, it seemed even foreign gods couldn't silence the rhythm of this empire. But the newcomers didn't just bring steel and horses. They brought another kind of law, one that claimed mercy, but often practiced something worse. At first, the conquistadors and priests watched in shock. They wrote about punishments that made their quills shake. Women stoned for infidelity, men executed for drunkenness, thieves flayed and displayed like warnings carved in skin. The friars called it savagery. The Aztecs called it justice. Then, piece by piece, the Spanish began to replace those rituals with their own. The temples were torn down, the idols buried, and the courts filled with new words: pecado, honra, vergüenza. Sin, honor, shame. It was a different vocabulary, but not a different game. Under colonial rule, punishment for women shifted from the marketplace to the confessional. Instead of public stones, there were whispered condemnations in church pews. A woman accused of adultery no longer faced death in the square. She faced excommunication, humiliation, and sometimes the cold walls of a convent she would never leave. The empire of the Aztecs had used fear to preserve balance. The empire that followed used guilt to control souls. One punished bodies, the other punished thoughts. For Aztec women, it must have felt like waking up in a nightmare that looked familiar but spoke another language. The rituals that once gave meaning to their pain were gone. The gods who once demanded balance were silent. Now their lives were measured by a foreign morality that claimed to save them, even as it erased everything they knew. The old punishments vanished from law, but not from memory. Stories lingered. Mothers whispered them to daughters in secret, half warning, half nostalgia. In the time of our grandmothers, they would say, the gods saw everything. And maybe that memory offered a strange comfort, because at least back then, punishment had a purpose. The Spaniards wrote about the women of Tenochtitlan as if they were ghosts, silent, compliant, shadows of the fierce figures who once sang and traded and gave birth as warriors. But beneath the silence, resistance survived. In markets, women sold food spiced with the herbs of their ancestors. In kitchens, they whispered old prayers over the fire. In childbirth, they still invoked Cihuacoatl's name under their breath, just loud enough for the gods to hear if they were still listening. And somewhere deep inside those whispers was the echo of the old fear, not just of death, but of dishonor. The punishment the Aztec women had dreaded most hadn't been the stones or the whips or the fire. It was the loss of dignity, the erasure of name and memory, to be cast out of the moral order of the world, to live as if already dead. That was the terror that kept their steps measured, their voices low, their hands steady, even under the weight of impossible rules. And when the empire fell, that terror didn't die. It transformed. The tools changed, the faces of the judges changed. But the expectation that women hold the world together through obedience and restraint stayed, echoing across centuries. You can almost picture it. A woman standing at dawn beside the canal, her reflection trembling in the water. Behind her, The city burns with new gods and new laws. She touches her hair, still growing back from punishment long past, and watches the sun rise over what used to be Tlaloc's temple. The same sun her ancestors fed with blood now shines for foreign saints. She doesn't cry. She just stares, caught between two worlds that both demanded her silence. History remembers the battles, the conquests, the temples, the gold. But somewhere beneath those grand stories lies another empire built not by kings or priests, but by women who learned to survive every version of control. They endured laws written on stone, then laws written on parchment, and through it all they carried the same quiet knowledge that punishment might shape the body, but it could never erase endurance. And maybe that's the real story, hidden under the rituals and executions, not just what the Aztecs did to their women, but what those women carried forward despite it. The strength to walk with water in their hands, never spilling, even when the world turned upside down. The punishment they feared most wasn't just death or pain, it was being forgotten, and they refused to give history that satisfaction. Their names may have been scraped from walls, their songs rewritten by foreign tongues, but their echo still lingers in the rhythm of the markets, in the way Mexican mothers hush their daughters at dusk, and in the way the stories of gods and warriors still bleed into lullabies. Somewhere in that echo, the old balance survives, fragile, human, and unbroken. The empire is gone, the stones are dust, but the silence those punishments carved into history still hums under the noise of the modern world, a reminder that the line between law and faith, order and cruelty, was always drawn across the bodies of women who never stopped enduring it.